here in Nebraska. You're on POLITALKS, and I'm here with NDP candidate Brian Chang. Thank you for being here, first of all. Can you give us a little introduction about yourself? So, who are you and where did you come from?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Brian Chang. I'm the candidate for the Toronto Centre NDP. I'm happy to put my name forward here because I believe that our area needs some new progressive leadership and someone who represents everyday people and understands what it's like to come from the community and to deal with all the issues the community is dealing with on an everyday. I have been long involved. I'm a labor organizer. I work with empowering workers to stand up for themselves and fight for better working conditions, whether you're a cleaner working in a Canadian Forces base or whether you're an office worker working for the Ministry of the Environment or a scientist working in the field. Everybody deserves good working conditions, and I believe in that, in worker solidarity to get us there.
So what do you think you will bring to Toronto?
For me, an arts and culture focus is really important. That it's not just about living in our community. It's about how do we make them more vibrant? How do we share stories? How do we connect with other people? And a lot of that has to do with art and culture. So I myself am a performing artist. I sing in the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir and have for many years now. And it's important for me to be part of these communities of people who come together and create arts and culture, share stories, create narrative, and really bind and create a community together. And politics is very much the same way, that we need people who are able to stitch our communities together, who are able to share stories, and who are able to action those so that we can dream of a better future together and make sure that nobody gets left behind.
And why do you believe we should choose NDP instead of Liberal or Conservative?
With the Conservatives, we're getting the same old thing over and over again, and cuts. And the main thing for me is that they're not paying attention to the climate emergency. And Andrew Scheer is actually, and his party don't believe that this is a priority. But we're hearing it at door after door after door. Whether it's racialized communities who have family back home in Bangladesh who are dealing with flooding, whether it's communities that have family in First Nations in the north that are dealing with forest fires. It is a major issue for all of us, and to have a major Canadian political party not take that seriously is irresponsible, in my opinion. And then the Liberals, we have them one day passing a motion to recognize a climate emergency, and then the next day buying a $4.5 billion pipeline. It's sending the wrong message, and the Liberals are happy to give us hugs in communities. Justin Trudeau is happy to go around, take selfies, give hugs, looks great. But then he turns around and makes all of these backroom corporate deals with Bill Morneau and all of these other ultra-rich people who don't understand what it's like for everyday people who are dealing with family who have to evacuate out of their communities because of forest fires, who are dealing with water they can't drink for years. And here in our community as well too, people are trying to get ahead. And I don't see the plans that help everyday people get ahead because the other parties are too focused on making sure that corporate Canada has what they need to be successful. But I am committed to making sure that we have what everyday people need in order to be successful.
So there's a lot of people saying NDP will never win. How will you alter people's perspectives?
There's this idea of a simple story, and our opponents often use the simple story of the NDP can't win because it's one that is just, it's very easy, it's very superficial, but we do win. We win all the time. We just have to look at MPP Suze Morrison, who represents Toronto Centre, who is a historic first NDP MPP to ever represent this neighbourhood, and who comes from Regent, lives just around the corner. That's major, and we do win regularly and consistently, and we bring diverse voices. We bring racialized people, we bring queer people, we bring those who live with disabilities, those with multiple lived experiences to the table, and I think that makes Canadian politics so much better, because rather than dealing with the same old, we're actually starting to dream of what a better future could look like. And in many ways, our MPPs look just like everyday Canadians. Our MPs, the candidates that we have right across the country, look like everyday Canadians, speak like everyday Canadians, and are willing to engage with everyday Canadians.
So in Toronto, we have a lot of traffic problems. What do you think about this issue, and how will you change it?
Sure. So the NDP has a plan to work with cities like Toronto. If Toronto wants fare-free public transit, then an NDP government will go hand in hand with that. And I love that idea. that you could literally step out on the street right here, hop on the streetcar, and not have to worry about paying a fare. That would be amazing, and it would be so much easier to get around our city, and it would be so much more accessible for people who are trying to get around their city. And that's a major step we can take towards getting people out of cars, reducing traffic, and moving towards public transit, which has fewer emissions and gets people around more efficiently.
Definitely. Are there any other issues around Toronto that you would like to speak on about how we would change those issues directly?
I think income inequality is a big one for me. It's all related to the climate emergency, and it doesn't matter whether, like, housing affordability, whether you're dealing with housing affordability, whether there's healthcare issues, whether we can't find jobs, like, everything is related to the way that we treat the environment. And right now we're not doing a very good job of treating the environment well. So jobs are suffering, people are suffering, health is suffering, our communities are suffering, our land is suffering, the Toronto Islands are flooding. There are so many issues, and they're all related to the fact that we're not taking the climate emergency seriously. That we need a government who recognizes that, but is also willing to take action on the environment and not leave people behind. And whether it's Indigenous peoples or workers or everyday people in downtown Toronto or everyday people in rural Ontario or rural Quebec, that we'll make sure, the NDP will make sure that nobody gets left behind as we transition to a green economy, tackle the climate emergency with the boldest plan ever by an NDP government. And then also make sure that we can dream about a better future and start to action that, so that we're not just dealing with the effects of a flood or a forest fire, that we're creating the conditions for us to not have to deal with those situations in the future, and that those communities are made more resilient and healthier by an NDP plan to tackle the climate emergency. The NDP has a very powerful plan called the Power to Change, and it is the most comprehensive piece of environmental policy that I've seen that really touches coast to coast everything from the economy to Indigenous peoples to workers to how people get around by public transit to building retrofits to building affordable housing to making sure that Indigenous people have access to homes that are appropriate to what their needs are to 300,000 new green economy jobs. There's so much that is part of that plan, and I'm really happy to stand behind it. And as somebody who studied public policy, I studied public policy with my master's degree, specifically climate change. And it's so heartening to see that we actually have a bold plan in front of us that can create the realistic action that we want to make sure that we're living up to our international commitments and that we're starting to dream of a better future for Canadians.
So can you give us a little insight into your interests and hobbies?
Yeah, so arts and culture is a big one. I'm a big fan of the theater scene as well as choral music in the city. There's so much going on at any given time in the city, and it doesn't matter whether you're in Regent. I mean, we're right beside Daniel Spectrum, which is a hub of art and culture in Regent, but also across the city. There's so much stuff that happens here that's amazing and exciting. And we don't have to go very far. The Sony Center, soon to be Meridian Hall, is here. I performed there as well too. I've rehearsed in some of the churches around our neighborhoods as well too. There are so many great avenues for art and culture in Toronto, and it's important that we continue to build that up so that we become a beacon, and people want to come here, people want to live here, and people want to live and share here.
And how do you plan to involve residents, everyday people, in the decision-making process in the city?
So one thing that we're hearing when you go door to door is that people don't see Bill Morneau around, that the Liberals have been very much not accessing the community or using them. That's your job. If you're a representative for a community, it is your job to go out there and make sure that you have everybody around the table, even the voices that you disagree with, because they are still people who live in our communities, and we have to make sure that we're addressing what their needs are. And whether you're queer, whether you're racialized, living with a disability, a senior, a worker, you have kids, you don't have kids, there are so many different ways that we can incorporate these people into our policy and decision making that makes us better overall. And there's so many great organizations that we can tap into, like Regent in Pocus, like making sure that we're communicating with people in the ways that they access. Whether that's being present in community festivals and not just corporate tables, and not just showing up for community events and cutting a big check, but making sure that we're actually on the ground, going to the restaurants in the neighborhood, chatting with people, going to the cafes, making the one-on-one connections with people in our schools, whether they're students, community members, this is a very engaged riding. People are out here, they love their communities, they're out there making sure that things are getting better. So we need representatives who are willing to work with those people to make sure that our communities can do so much more. Imagine having a partner at the federal table who actually takes our community seriously, shows up, doesn't treat us like an absentee landlord, and actually commits to making life better for everyday people.
I'm Minerva Navaska. This has been PoliTalks. Thank you for watching.